Someone notifies me off about
Okay. Welcome to the Tempe City Council Work Study Session for September 20th, 2018. The first item on the agenda is a call to the audience for the issue review session and committee of the whole items. Audience members have up to 3 minutes to discuss and address to the City Council the items listed on this agenda. If you would like to speak on an item, could you please fill out a speaker's card, which can be found in the back of the council chambers, and hand it to a deputy city clerk. And then when it is your time, I will call your name when it is your turn to speak. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us on any of the items listed on the agenda? Could you please get my attention? I do not have any cards. Seeing none, I'll go right to the issue review items. And the first one is our city website refresh update. Michelle and Miss Nikki, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor and Council, Nikki Ripley, Communication and Media Relations Manager, and
Michelle Gurry, Web and Design Coordinator.
I want to take a second to acknowledge members of the Communication and Media Relations team behind us, in particular Martha Garner, who is Michelle's partner in crime on this website refresh and so much more. So thanks to everyone who's been involved in this. We're excited to show you the progress, where we are right now, and what's coming for the public on tempe.gov. Our website work corresponds to a couple of different measures within your second council priority about strong community connections, perhaps most directly to measure 2.4 about what our residents think of the quality of the city website. Brief history, we launched tempe.gov internally in the 90s with 2 Websters in IT, and then we moved to a content management system in 2012. And another landmark for us was adding responsive design in 2014, which is all about resizing the screen automatically based on the device you're using. Maybe. We regard the website as a really critical outreach tool. It's great for communication and engagement, but also for transactions. In 2017, we had 6.2 million page views and 1.35 million active users. Most people get to the website by doing just a plain old Google search. About 26% come directly, whether that's to a page that they bookmarked, or by typing in tempe.gov, or by typing in a friendly URL they remember or saw in a brochure. Our top pages routinely are the library and jobs and courts. About an even split in terms of what people are using when they visit the website, mobile device versus desktop. And ADA compliance and inclusion is extremely important to us, and we'll talk to you more about that.
So why refresh?
Yes, Councilman McKeevy, real quick.
I just have a quick question about Phoenix. It was such an outlier user city with almost 23%. And the other cities, surrounding cities, are so low. Why do you think that is?
We could speculate. I don't know if Michelle has ideas too, but we know that assets like KRC and Kiwanis Park in general are heavily used by Phoenix residents, so that may account for some of it.
Right.
We just have great
Tempe,
services
Lake,
and amenities
Right.
that
Tempe,
we
Lake,
attract people from all across the
Right.
valley to our quality of life. That's actually good. If you look at this, that's a good thing.
No, I wasn't. I was just curious about the outlier aspect of Phoenix. Thanks.
So why refresh the site right now? Well, our vision contract renewal came up this past May. So last year we started this process so that we were prepared to really launch it by the end of this year. There were new functions available. We, of course, went through a branding process, and so the branding colors and the photos and everything that kind of goes with that were available for the new site. The TCA, of course, has a sub-site that launched the beginning of this year or last year. I think it was last year, actually. And we were doing a sub-site for the library with this new launch as well. So it kind of was just a good time to refresh everything.
Before we engaged in the changes we have, we wanted to make sure we were checking in with the research at our disposal and seeking out new pieces of data as well. So as we always do, we were mindful of what people told us in the community and business surveys. And then Vision helped us do a survey About 1,000 people, employees and community members responded to that, which was a great response rate. About 75% of them told us they thought the existing website made it easy to find information. So that was good for us in terms of understanding where we were as a baseline. Then we collected data through Vision about how people use the home page and other things. We definitely wanted to collaborate from the beginning with IT and the city departments we partner with as a division all the time. Those departmental contacts and clients are really vital to us in terms of keeping the website fresh and accurate, and so their input throughout this has been very important, as will feedback from businesses and residents along the way and afterwards.
So what's new and different about our website? For starters, we have what's called parallax scrolling, and you're seeing a very small little picture of that, but we are going to, at the end, we have a full view of the site so we can actually scroll through it a little bit. But the parallax scrolling is just that as you go down, different parts of the page move and do different things. The branding, we're using the colors and everything throughout to really bring it all together. Definitely more eye-catching, more photos, video, the ability on that homepage banner to change that photo constantly, which will be great. We're integrating a page reader, which is also very exciting. It's not just an ADA thing. If anyone wants to take advantage of that, to be able to have our website read the pages to them instead of reading, they'll be able to do that, which is nice. And then we've added a Webster content approval process, and this is to help with the quality control and to really get broken links and all that kind of stuff, much better control and all that kind of thing. Some of the ADA features for our site, and this is true, some of these are on our current site as well as the new site, and that's the adjustable font size where the end user can make the font larger or smaller as they need. The font heading colors, this is new. We've got some different colors, but they're all a certain ratio background to foreground color scheme to make sure that they're viewable. The headings, there's a number of layers of headings for hierarchy so that as the readers, if someone's hearing the site instead of viewing the site, the readers are able to jump from heading to heading. Alt tags on images and documents. We'll be working more closely with the Websters on really making sure that those alt tags aren't just, file 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. And I think that page reader will help that because that will read out loud when they view their pages. Calling out PDF documents as PDF documents. And of course, the page reader itself. So on our homepage at the very top, we are definitely going more search-centric, since that is, of course, a favored way of navigating our site is just to search for what you want. There's also better search capabilities, so for the first time we are able to prioritize what someone finds when they do a search. So if there's a specific page we want them to find with any given words, we're able to do that. So this will get people through our site quicker, finding what they want faster. There's larger action buttons, pay, register, connect, that type of thing. As you scroll down, and we'll see this shortly, there is events. Events are definitely, and this might address kind of the Phoenix thing, that events were certainly one of the most visited spot on our homepage, or what's happening in Tempe. And so we're of course featuring events. There'll be 4, but they'll rotate out as events happen, new things come up. And so they will rotate around. You can click on any one of those to get more information. And then we'll show you on the next screen here.
Councilman Navarro?
I'm sorry.
Just real quick question on the events. I appreciate that comment. I mean, that's the frustration I have on the current webpage is we do events. Pretty much we're known for that. And yet that's not even a tag we can just go to right immediately. We have to kind of navigate through it. So I appreciate
Yeah, and it
highlighting.
definitely, it showed up on our heat map and everything that, we saw from Vision, that events is
And with that being said, are we able to, I know we have our city events, but we have these events that happen in the city that aren't really city sanctioned events. Are we able to navigate to events that are happening in the city?
The events on the city calendar are city events and events that go through the city's events task force. Those are included on here, but not just anybody coming on our calendar adding events. There's,
Not a hyperlink we can
We
do?
could look
Yeah.
at
Oh,
linking
hyperlinks,
out to the
absolutely.
tourism office or DTA.
absolutely.
The reason why I bring that up is, that's probably one of the things that I talk to people about, is like, when I go to your page, you give me, park stuff that I'm not looking for that. I'm looking
Right.
for,
Yeah, we
it'd be
can
great if
absolutely
we had
do
this
that.
one-stop shop area that we could go to, that we do everything.
Mhm. Yeah, we can definitely link to other calendars within our calendar page for sure. Yeah.
Councilman Hernando Savage?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I would agree. And I know, Michelle, we've talked about like trying to do an annual calendar because there's so many things that are going on. And I think for any of our residents to be able to navigate through it. Now, whatever that looks like, if it's links going to other things, I mean, there are some other organizations that do a really good job of promoting all of our events, regardless of who's putting them on. So I feel like it should be really our responsibility to have that master calendar somewhere so people can kind of access it and view it, however that looks. If there's a way to do that, I think we've got to somehow incorporate that.
So one good way to do that, though, is when events come to the city, like, for example, Ballet Under the Stars. It was at our sports complex, and Jennifer and I were there. If there's a way when even if they don't go through a city, and they don't go through events task force, at some point they have to contact the city because they're part of this, they're going to be in the city. We should be one of the checklist items is that you need to help provide us a link so we can help promote your event on our city. I mean, at least give us a way for them so we can connect the link and they can tie it to the City of Tempe webpage or vice versa when they come in beforehand. It may not be a city sanctioned event. You may not be involved in it, but when a promoter or someone comes in, it could be the festival that's going to happen at the sports complex with the Indian community. They need to be able to give us that information so that we know this is what we've been talking about, how we can connect those dots, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Right.
There's a checkbox when they come to the city. Now, if they don't come to the city, it's kind of hard if we may not know who's coming where. Yeah, if they don't schedule the space, then it's,
Right.
we can do what we can do. Maybe have an intern look at certain events, coming attractions, and certain
Right, it might be
articles,
kinda
periodicals, but I
might
think
be
it'd be
going-
helpful to have a checklist when they do come.
Yeah, it might be going more back to the facilities themselves and us working with them to, as the space is reserved at a specific facility, kind of
Right.
finding someone there that could be responsible for making sure their facility events are added. So that, there's definitely a way to add more.
But then there's that larger category of events, and I don't see how we could keep a listing of those because it would just be such a nightmare. But ASU has, I think,
Yeah,
a couple
ASU's
thousands of events
calendar's
a year
big,
in
right.
Tempe, but it would be good to link to them.
Right.
But we couldn't possibly maintain that calendar.
Yeah.
Councilman Hens and then Councilman Granville.
Yes, what about putting the events on this previous page also as button, just so?
It will be, yeah. And I mean, well, it'll be on the page, but yeah.
I mean, as one of, like,
Yeah.
another button added to the bottom, since it's so popular?
I'll have to take a look, because within events that are, when you scroll down a little, the actual events will be on that same page. And then you could go to the full calendar from there.
When we show you at the end of this, you'll get a sense of where things are on the page, because we're showing you individual sections at a time here.
It is all one page.
Let's get through the presentation, then if you have more questions, Councilman Granville.
Yeah, just to go to the mayor's point and to Councilman Navarro's point, I remember years ago, it's going back quite a ways, when there was the big bike event that's at Tempe Beach Park. I can't think of the name of it. Tour de Fête, yeah. That's one that wasn't on our list on our webpage at all. But yet we knew that they were there because they booked the space. It's a point of pride for the city even.
Yeah.
But because it just
Yeah.
wasn't a thing, wasn't on our webpage. The Aloha Festival, 100,000 people, not on our webpage.
Right.
Like, I think there would be, in a perfect world, there'd be two ways to do it. And Stephen Mifflin and I have talked about this before. One, that there's a calendar of some kind, but then also there's sort of a clickable space, because one of the things that comes up is we might have 2 or 3 events on the same day at the Tempe Beach, not Tempe Beach Park, but the lake area. There might be the Aloha Festival on the south side of the lake. There might be a Splash and Dash on the north side of the lake. There might be a Dragon Boat Festival further down. And to give people the ability to say, here is in this space the times, I think having the two different ways, otherwise you're going to get a really long list sometimes on a page.
We're definitely hearing what you're saying about
Yeah,
the importance
got
of
it.
events.
Thank you.
Keep going.
It's important.
All right.
Okay, so on the calendar, and if you've been on our new TCA site, this actually works the same way, where the event actually pulls up now, an image, more information, and from there, it will link to wherever you want it to link to. Let's see.
Okay. Also on the homepage, we'll continue to have a prominent place for news, calling out, much like events will, one in particular, and then having more as well.
And then finally, for video, we've got lots of great Tempe 11 videos, and this gives us a chance to highlight some of the videos that have been done, and also to reach a younger audience that's wanting to watch video instead of reading information. So there'll be one showcase, 3 additional ones, and again, they'll be rotated and changed as needed. The interior pages will also follow the same branding color. There will be a photo bar, just like on the front, that could be changed on every single page. So depending on what the topic is, we can have different photos there as well. News, events, social media, all of our buttons and photos and everything, again, will go along with our branding and be consistent throughout the site. And then the search bar, there's a search icon on top, and when you click that, then you see a larger, as you can see on this screen, a larger search button comes down, so at any point you can also continue to do a search. We also put in place a new content approval process, and this is to help us get kind of a tighter control on all of our Websters, everyone that's working throughout the site. People come and go, and we, of course, don't have any way of really knowing this. So we now have a publisher and an editor role, so there'll be people responsible in every department, every division for publishing the pages. Those same people will receive content review reminders every couple months. They'll be responsible for actually reading what's on there before they publish it. So whether they create that page or not, our publishers within the areas will also be expected to take a look at the content that's being shown.
Quick question.
Yes, Robin?
So what would be the expectation of the turnaround time? Like if there's major changes or new events or things, that need to be changed or updated in the website, how would that happen?
Well, it will happen the
Is
same.
it proactively in the sense of the department would notify the publisher, the editor, whatever you said? How does that work?
There are editors, right now, basically everyone's considered a publisher. So we've got like 175, 200 people throughout the city that know how to use the software that are adding content. So all this is basically doing is all those people still have the ability to do that, but then not everyone in every department will have the ability to actually publish it. It will take someone else within their area for some of the people to review their information and publish it. So basically it's as fast as they turn that around. They'll know who their publishers, if they're not already a publisher themselves, they'll know who their publisher in their area is, and if they need to get something out right now, if there's no one around, they could certainly contact one of us or the PIOs and have a page published immediately. But it shouldn't, hold things back. If it is, then we need to take another look at who's editing and publishing.
I just don't want there to be
area.
a lot of red tape. I mean, I entrust that everybody's there to doing the right thing and,
Yeah. And that's why we
professional. And
didn't-
if there's an error, I would hope that there's an
Right.
able to go in and change it and
Yes,
make corrections.
yes, they can.
But I think as things update, what's the point of having a website if it's not updated
Yeah, no,
fairly
totally
frequently?
agree. And that's why we didn't actually put this in place to begin with, is we want everything done immediately. But we've learned over time that also makes it where there's no one accountable. And so.
I guess I would be curious though, if you have the publishers that can do the work, but then they need to get checked, like how many of those are there? Because that could really create some red tape. We don't want to create barriers.
We want to have consistency, and I think it's good that the departments can update their specific section of it. I think that's great. And then as long as there's consistency and guidelines, and there's usually, if it's not the department head, someone needs to be held accountable. I mean, and we got to update it. And we should put, part of those guidelines, probably should put a time frame on how often you update it, or something to look at,
Right. We
if
can
that,
certainly.
if that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah, we can certainly push more for
Okay.
that too. And that is all happening within the departments, the divisions. It's not happening at our office.
So along those lines of quality assurance, we are using the refresh to take the opportunity to improve quality and usefulness throughout the site. One thing we'll be doing is through our new vision contract, we have a 3-month limited trial with a service called Site Improve, which will check for things like broken links and ADA issues and alert us to them. We are instituting new quarterly meetings with publishers and editors to increase communication with them about best practices and give them tips and tricks and let them know about updates that are coming soon from Vision and that kind of thing. Continuing to email with Websters as we already do. As a division, we're going to be undertaking some proactive page audits, checking for things like, does the page express the brand in visuals and words? Is it accurate? Is it timely? Is it accessible? Is it interactive? So we'll be doing that. Revamping our training. We're going to be talking to Websters about how to make great content in addition to how to post it. So our training will focus on asking people to convey the brand principles as much as possible of compassion, innovation, and energy, how to write for the web, a new Tempe style guide for how we prefer that you write dates or days of the week, or how you choose photos so that you're representing everyone.
So at this point, Vision actually has moved all of our content over as of last week, but everything's kind of in a big jumble, and we don't have access to the admin yet. So we hope by maybe next week, they'll have kind of done what they need to do to get it to the point where we can start working on it. And then we'll be pretty much touching every single page because we have a number of changes that have happened, both on the design side, but even on the structure, the tree structure. So we will work on it over the next couple of weeks. We begin training all of the Websters. So every one of our Websters is required to come to a new training. And that begins on October 9th. So for about 3 weeks, we've got a dozen different classes where we're asking all of our Websters to attend. And if everything goes smoothly, we're looking at about November 1 for a launch. So we are getting online. Then once we get to that point, we will also be doing focus groups, probably at the library, and start. The navigation, of course, is probably the easiest thing of our site to change. So that's.
A question. Focus groups will have a variety of different age groups, I imagine.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Granville.
I think Joel and I have the same concern. When you do a focus group, could you just at some point, rather than don't just sit a group down and explain to them how the website works and ask them if they like it.
Right.
Sit them down and a bunch of people of varying ages and abilities in front of some laptops and just be like, this is our new website. Here's a checklist of things we'd like you to find.
Yeah, we've done
events,
Yeah.
how to contact the mayor, boards and commissions, whatever. And then just take a watch. Because having done instructional design for years for an online company, my mom is a totally different demographic than myself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
didn't insult the older woman demographic.
And she just figured computers were a fad, and she was gonna do without it.
Incredibly savvy who are.
I agree. That's why I use my mom as an
Lauren,
example.
you're in. I'm with you.
All of Colby's moms, she is very average.
So this is actually, Greg's going to run it here. This is our site. So as he moves down and kind of moves over different things, there'll be some changes, some things move. And as you can see, this is all one page. So it's the main, the search on top, the events, the news, and then video.
Faces were blurred out.
Protect our identity.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. I tried to get it fixed, but it wasn't possible. Don't have a back-end access.
You can see the visual brand is represented, the tagline, you just passed that by too.
And then there's an interior page. This one doesn't have the photo banner on top, but the photo banner on top is an option. Of course, news and events, social media, that kind of stuff are options. And then this is the library subpage. So they'll have essentially a very close resemblance to our homepage, but they have different buttons and different features based on what the library needs are, since they are definitely our single biggest user. Any other questions?
Yes,
Yes.
Councilmember
I
Keating.
have some comments, and I'm really sorry. As a former website designer, I'd always hate when people would, pick apart my final product. Not that I'm picking apart. I only have one aesthetic comment. The four buttons right there, I really don't like the black. I don't know why. It looks unfinished to me. Maybe
Like
white would look
type?
better.
It's a circle.
I don't know. Something about it. It looks unfinished to me. I'm not saying you have to change it. I'm just, it's,
Are you talking about the type color?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I like the font. It's fine. I don't like the black. I don't know why. It
I don't like
doesn't,
circles.
doesn't look finished. Okay.
Drop shadow, needs a drop shadow.
That, you get me. Well, I mean, I don't know. Not saying you have to change it. I'm just giving you my feedback here. Another thing that I would really like to see is when we're moving content over, right now, a lot of the content on the site lives in PDFs, which are not searchable or indexable by Google. So I'd like to see those PDFs made into HTML pages so that they will be indexable in the future.
PDFs, we talked a lot about this with Vision, and the PDFs are searchable if they are created in the native program. If you can highlight, type, and actually copy and paste text from a PDF, then it is actually searchable through Google. It's only when it's done as an image that it's not searchable at all. There are, there'll be things that we just can't probably put out there, as all HTML if it's some huge document. But we will be pushing wherever we can, certainly, to embed it into our website where we can.
That's certainly news to me. I was not aware that PDFs were searchable in any regard.
They come up in our search engine even, actually.
Well, they come up, but you can't search. I can't search what's in it. Like, I can open it up and then search it, but if I wanted the dog barking ordinance and it was just in a PDF, but I wanted the specifics about it, but it's not. It's actually on there, and that's just an example. I could get the PDF, but I wouldn't be able to go directly to where I'm looking for on the page. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I would
within
just
the
like
page,
us to
I can
see.
that.
I'd like to see us, if we can, get away from posting information in PDFs and more just coding it in HTML so that it's more available, more accessible to the public. That's my only two comments. Thank you.
I just want to thank you guys for what you're doing, because I like the look and the feel of this, what you guys are rolling out. Not only is this a critical communication tool for us, but it's also a place where our residents go to get information. And it's our tool to really get the word out about what's happening, whether it's events or what's happening within the city, or what goes back to the agenda items for the clerk's office. So I think that's great. And I mentioned before, I think it's great that you have each individual department can update their section. And I think that's good as long as there's some consistency there. I think that's good in a timely manner. If you could, I saw you write that down. But it's, and also the 311, the videos that you're showing. That's great to get those videos out there, because we're doing a lot more on social media.
Right.
And I do concur with Councilmember Keating. Whatever you can with the HTML would be great as well. And some of those videos could be, that you have on 301 that you have on the website, can also translate to other social media accounts that we have within the public record, the public ones that we have. And then I think it's great. Thank you. Anybody else? Great, thank you.
I'm disappointed.
All right. Next item, Tempe Beach Park Rio Salado Master Plan. Monty. Monty Richardson.
God help me if I find the PDF, I swear to God.
Talk to me about the whole thing that Andrew and I went through when we had like free employee swim times. They literally made like a PDF document with a link and wondered why nobody could find
All
it.
right.
That's how it was when I
Welcome.
It's gotten better, but when I was a candidate, it was really bad trying to find information on there.
All right, Bonnie, take it away.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Council. We are really excited to be here to talk about the final draft of the Beach Park and Rio Salado Master Plan.
Very cool.
With me is Diane Jacobs from Home Street Studio, and she's also representing the work of Floor Associates, who were also on the project. So we're here to present this final draft, and we're asking for your comments, suggestions, and if this plan reflects the council's vision for Rio Salado over the next 20 years. We have provided you with hard copies because it's a lot of information, so it's sometimes difficult to see on a little screen. So we are addressing the quality of life performance measures specific to recreation, arts, and cultural centers. But I will say that we're also addressing a lot of your other important strategies, strong community connections. We're creating spaces for people to come in and have social engagement, safe and secure, but also sustainable growth and our open space within the city. This is the extent of the scope project. When we started, it was just from Priest to rural, but we did recognize that we couldn't quite leave out the area to McClintock, so we expanded that a bit. The green areas indicate that we will eventually want to plan from border to border, but for right now, we're looking at that blue area.
So,
Go ahead.
on that. Okay, so just to sort of reiterate on the scope, essentially the scope of the project, which is quite an armful to sort of embrace with the Rio Salado actually going 42 miles, from east to west. The essential sort of task at hand for the design team was to really study the area, see what's there, see what's missing, be very analytical about it, go out to the public along with staff and share these findings and get input. It was quite a sight in the sense that there was more passion for this project than almost any other public project we've seen. And then the final aspect of the scope was to create sort of a roadmap document, which is the conceptual design toward the end.
So this is our integration diagram, and as we've gone out to talk with the public, we made sure that they understood that we're coordinating all of our planning efforts. So that Rio Salado integrates with Urban Core and many of the other programs and plans that we've done. It also integrates with Rio Reimagined, and I think this offers us an opportunity, as with all the other cities, to really achieve more by being a regional project. It includes the cities you see as well as the 2 Native American communities. And this slide, while difficult to read, is meant to just show the different projects, and depending on who I was presenting to, I would focus in on some of the benefits of the different projects.
There was, if I could jump in on that, there was an attempt to really get into what the other projects were about and intent and sort of design vocabulary and kind of overall attitude. So whatever happened on this project was shared with the other groups doing other things on adjacent projects.
So we did look back in history. We looked at everything from the ancient Sonoran desert people all the way through the pioneer period, what we gained in Tempe and those landmarks that are in the Rio Salado. So, well, there we go. We know from your previous conversation that you know that we are good at creating large events, and it's a part of Tempe. We embrace it. However, we find that a lot of people don't know that there's more to the Rio Salado Park than just Beach Park. We think that by developing some of the spaces around the lake, we'll be able to have more opportunities for multiple events and also perhaps disperse some of the parts of the large events. It's a bit, looking at the Rio Salado Park, like it's overutilized and underutilized. So we get a lot of concentrated activity in Beach Park, but we've got some other areas that are ripe for developing.
So this slide really was the first of many analytical slides to just talk about the assets. And as Bonnie says, there's a great deal of sort of intangible asset surrounding Rio Salado Park, and that people already love it and already recognize it. And there's many, many events that are sort of regularly staged here. In some sense, the real kind of, the best part of this project is that there exists a real infrastructure to build off of. There's connections from other places. There's already beautiful spaces along the southern portion of the riverbank. There's a wonderful natural environment on both the east and the west side. There are buildings, there's artwork. So you really already have the beginnings of a wonderful urban plan, quite a lot to start with. You can see some of these are images. In some ways, this is the epicenter of the entire valley, and it really is a wonderful example of life in the desert and integration of natural space with urban space. And there's already kind of the beginnings of some very thoughtful, well planned out kind of initiatives that are worth building upon, not starting over. As well as you know, adjacent Class A office development. There's architectural elements where events have already happened, and there's a wealth of amazing sort of hidden spaces. And in smaller sort of foreign cities, you know, that would be like a huge, huge plaza underneath, and for us it's just like a little sort of side jaunt under a freeway, but it really is a wonderful asset, and there's so many possibilities with these spaces.
And I would add that that provides structural shade. So as we're looking for ways to take advantage of natural and man-made features, we could really celebrate those areas underneath.
So, you know, as we said, there's a lot of cool stuff there already, but part of the reason why we're here is because there are current challenges. There is a certain amount of connectivity in that people can arrive there, but it's not always that easy. It lacks sort of a cohesive identity, and there's kind of an imbalance of what's been developed and what's not been developed. And really what we're looking for is to help guide you as a design team to have a roadmap as things are going to come, either public infused funding or private. And right now some of these challenges are really standing in the way. There's infrastructure issues, and there's other kind of sort of blank spaces, and there's desire to kind of do things on there that are not necessarily congruent with one another. So we're trying to sort of embrace those challenges as we move forward. These are just some images. You can see that there's unused spaces. There's kind of a lack of edge definition, which at best is kind of not the prettiest, but at worst it could be a hazard. There's really you know, big challenges with wayfinding, where to park, how to get there. Even people who don't use a park enjoy parks in many cities just by driving by them, and you can't really enjoy this from the perimeter of this full space. And you can see that there's some structures. I had to ask Bonnie, what's that thing up in the upper left? And you know, there's sort of a lot of little leftover things that were intended to be kind of pleasant or at least useful that we need to kind of embrace and deal with. And of course, the water is there to help with flood control, and there's a lot of kind of strict Army Corps of Engineer requirements that we need to be vigilant of.
Councilman Granville?
So I had been told sort of secondhand, not by a staff member, and I'm just trying to get the true story, that things that are built around the lake, one of the difficulties with it is that in the event there's a flooding incident, that you either need to be able to remove it, or the assumption is it's all going to end up underwater. What is the actual truth about all that, if you happen to know? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I've just heard so many rumors. I don't know what the real story is.
Well, you know, it is there as a waterway that is also not only collecting and moving water, but it's also there to collect water in the event of a flood event. Now, To a certain extent, that is true, but generally speaking, there are rules and mitigation obligations for the bank of the river that we can sort of undertake in order to make it viable. But then there are certain sort of grand ideas that wouldn't fly because this does need to collect water, as I said, in the event of flood. So the idea of using it like a river, like the Mississippi River or a waterway, is not quite accurate for this. So you couldn't put a large sort of swimming pool in it because it couldn't, you know, survive in those cases. But at the same time, you could put something next to it that's actually sort of connected, but not necessarily in. So it's on a case-by-case basis.
And actually, the 100-year flood is identified on some of our maps, and that actually takes in all of Beach Park. So there are some suggestions in the county about not being able to plant trees in a floodplain. And we're having conversations with them about that. We're also restricted somewhat by gabion mats that are part of the structure when they created the dam.
I don't know what that is.
There, you know how you see cages with rocks in them up on the freeway? Well, these are horizontal, and they're meant to stabilize the land mass adjacent to the lake. And with that, it's difficult to plant trees because you've got a cage of rocks instead of a bunch of soil. So we have some ideas about how we might work with that, but those are truly challenges that need some innovative ideas. So I'm going to talk just for a minute about our outreach. We had 4 really successful stakeholder meetings. We had over 200 surveys submitted, both at the meetings and online. And I feel like this has been the strongest public outreach and attendance that we've had on a planning project. So there are a lot of people really interested in the project. They wanted to tell us what they thought was appropriate, what they'd like to do. Of course, we have broad range of opinions, and those are all online, so people can actually read the survey responses. In addition to that, I made over 8 contact presentations with commissions, also addressed different groups that were interested in learning about the project, and it's been very well received. Now on this slide, you start to see some words. Those were terms that came up over and over again on a lot of the surveys and notes, recognizing a need for connectivity. Also, have something there that we can do, a reason for us to stay there to eat or drink or play, addressing multiple age groups. So little kids can play, or a grandparent can take their child and find a quiet place to read a book.
Now, we've had the good fortune of doing this with several cities, both in and outside of Arizona. And the one thing about Tempe is that you guys like being together. And over and over and over again, as Bonnie said, the same theme sort of came to the top. And so there's amazing momentum here for very, very similar activities and similar sort of needs from a public outreach point of view.
So I'm going to have Diane talk about some of the character areas and activities for the site. Before I do want to emphasize that this plan is designed to be flexible over time. We know we can't predict what technology is going to be like 10 years from now, let alone what people will be interested in doing. So we've looked at appropriate places for types of events, but over the years it will transform. What we hope is that this roadmap will really set the bar for quality and continuity.
So the maps that are to follow, you all have copies of them, and I'd invite you to take a look at them digitally so you can sort of get in there. It's kind of interesting. But I'm going to go through them very, very quickly. The point of all this is that we really, really looked at it. We looked at it from a very technical, analytical point of view, and then we started to organize it in terms of, you know, what is there? What's the logical sort of trajectory of what each of these spaces around the river should be? And so you see the colors there are designed to say, you know, you're probably not going to have a concert in the upper, you know, northwest corner, which is long, skinny, green, and tied to a sensitive habitat. So the colors really represent what should go on where. And then as we began to sort of define what should go on where, we cast a really wide net. We went to other cities, and you can see they're tiny photographs. That's why looking at this online is a little bit better. But there's a lot of exciting things happening in public spaces that we can sort of adopt with the infrastructure available in Tempe. So those spaces in some ways are kind of designing themselves, but you really need a set of guidelines to make sure that when people come with good ideas, you kind of have a sense of what's going to go where. So it's just really like a structure, a skeleton for activities. And then finally, you know, what has been built there? There's an awful lot there that's established, especially Marina Heights area, and then of course the Tempe Center for the Arts, and then there's the marina up on the north side. But you can see that there's big, big gaps in how this loop works. So with this kind of division between one piece and another, then our problem began to be more and more defined. What do we need to do with this kind of leftover question?
So as we were speaking with people and taking in all this information, this diagram really came to the top of the surface, and we feel these three elements are critical to a successful park, and that includes the loop for people to be able to circulate around, whether on bike or on foot, the nodes to provide small and large activities, and the connectors. So we did look at establishing these 5 principles to help plan in the future. And again, this goes back to the diversity of design and consistent vision.
So basically, those 5 principles of all the kind of things that we collected over several months are kind of the rules. And what we're presenting here today is really this set of rules. If you take one piece of paper home to look at, I would take this piece of paper home. This is what we're sort of recommending as kind of a roadmap moving forward for how Tempe Beach Park or Rio Salado Beach Park can evolve and become a viable public amenity, not just right now, but for the next 50 years. And this is embracing, as I said, things from the past, things from the present, and what we imagine will be important in the future. So the basic 5 principles are, it should feel like it has public ownership. Like most great city parks, it should feel like it belongs to everybody. Sometimes there's private things on it, and there's sharing, but generally it's a public space. There should be some connectivity, not only to the neighborhoods, especially like along Hardy. You know, that's a really big draw for people that walk their dogs, ride their bikes, jog there every day, but also connectivity to the Sonoran Mountain Preserve. It should be connected and easy to get to. The next thing everybody wants right away when you ask, what do you want in Arizona? Doesn't matter where you are, is shade. It's not of value to us if we're uncomfortable. Shade is really attached to that one idea of a continuous loop. The 4th thing is opportunity, especially in Tempe. People want to do stuff. They want to do stuff together. They said everything from chess in the park to, you know, other things. And then sustainability, also very important, taking care of the planet. And these next 4 slides really kind of divide up into the various zones and begin to tell you in detail exactly what's happening where. This, on the furthest west portion of the plan, you see an eco zone. It's tied directly to the Tempe Center for the Arts, and there's sports fields, or volleyball courts, I should say, to the north, as well as a wheels park to the north. And these are all based on kind of what might belong there logically, I guess. And then as you move to the next quadrant over to the east, you see Tempe Beach Park and a variety of entertainment opportunities to the north of that, potentially linked by bridges or maybe a water taxi, and other kind of recreational activities along the north side as well. And then moving into the 3rd quadrant from the west, the marina area kind of is the public hub here. And the idea here is a place to park, a place to gather from the north side, because much of the entry comes from that Tempe Beach Park area, and we're looking to sort of spread energy and spread activities over to the north, which already has the start of kind of a boating sort of, I guess, experience along that area. And then moving to the last quadrant of this particular project, you can see that there's a swimming hole and water play component that is not directly in the lake itself, but adjacent to and sort of taking advantage of the atmosphere and the views. And then another riparian habitat picnic area over to the right, but you can see Indian Bend Wash sort of sliding in from the north.
As well as the proposed head bike bridge, which can be another great element in helping people get around the lake. So it seemed like we had a lot of different things and ideas. I looked at trying to shuffle through them and identify items so that it might be easier to decide what to do next and how we pick a couple of things that move forward. A lot of the activities and comments fall in this infrastructure, but they're vary from being very affordable to very expensive. And so figuring out how to plan forward, that's important. Under funding, we suggested some options that we found occurred in some of the better parks around the US. And many of them go to a model similar to the Bryant Park model, where they have some entity, usually a nonprofit conservancy, that is devoted to maintaining, taking care of the park, funding a lot of the items that you want to see in the park, and provides for some creative collaborations along the way. Got a little too quick. Quick start, what can we do now? Maybe look for some of the available funds to jumpstart some smaller pieces, evaluate what's on that list, start to prioritize what nodes you're interested in seeing, and collaborating with those who are developing along the lake. So this is really legacy planning, and if we want to really develop this first-class park, we need long-term commitment, and also that means not just building it, but funding it to be maintained over time.
Councilman Navarro.
Thanks, Mayor. Just quickly, and I don't know, maybe it's also a Ken question, but with lake assessments, the funds for lake assessments obviously are to maintain the lake and the infrastructure and things like that, but it's not to do any like impact fees, so to speak, and do, so that basically any development that does come on the lake, they don't have technically impact fees to help with any of these things. Okay.
Right. But it's a wonderful asset that certainly affects the properties around it more so than some other parts.
But, and then just to add on to that, if we were to do a development agreement, that could be part of an agreement, though, is to support maybe something that we want around the lake. Okay. Thanks.
So our last slide shows that we're asking you, does this plan really represent what you want to see as a future development of the park? If so, we would return in November, hopefully with a resolution that you would approve and adopt the master plan. Following that, we could then initiate, have staff initiate an implementation plan to bring to you about what might be feasible, what kind of structure, what type of schedule you might look at for the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Councilman Keating.
I just want to say that this plan and what you've outlined is very much in line with what I envisioned for Tempe Beach Park and the Tempe Lake altogether. So I'm very impressed and very pleased, so thank you.
Thanks.
And I want to say, you know, Bonnie, thank you and your staff and everyone involved in this. It took a lot of hours, and I think what's really important, we really pride ourselves on inclusiveness and including and that's something that should not go unnoticed, because we value going to our residents and our partners to get that feedback. And this is a working document, as you mentioned, and I think it's something that that we first and foremost acknowledge, but also embrace. I also want to know that it's going to take a lot of working with our private and our public sectors. We talk about infrastructure. You know, and I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again, you know, we're very grateful for the previous councils that helped set this vision, because this was I don't know if you're familiar, this was a countywide vote, and it was shot down. But the mayor and the council at the time said, hey, we're going to go ahead and do this. Everyone, it's funny when I talk to my colleagues around the valley, they're like, wow, you got some great things happening. And when Senator McCain wanted to make the reimagine, I get it, but there was an opportunity before. We seized it. We need to continue to embrace and invest in our asset. This is a quality asset. The connectivity is so crucial. And as a council and as a residents, we need to look at making sure when we go through our CAPs, making sure that we have that connectivity and the accessibility, whether it's through the idea campus that we're talking about, how we're going to have that connectivity and integrate it with the TCA, how we're going to have the connectivity with Tempe Beach Park, with Hayden Ferry, with the Novus District, and what's happening on the north side of the lake. Those are all critical that we look at continuing to invest in the assets that we have before us. This is just the cusp of it. I like the fact that this is a working document, but one of the things, because of the investment, this is the second highest visited attraction in the state to the Grand Canyon. And it's not by accident you listed the events that we have here. And that's something, one of the things I think we really also need to look at is what are some of the low-cost opportunities that we could provide some of the nonprofits in our community to be able to have access to us. I know I forgot how many events, weekends were booked at a certain time. It was like 23 between May and September or something like that. We also need to look at what can we do to offer some other opportunities for those nonprofits that they come in to see, so it's not so cost burdensome to have an event at Tempe, somewhere in and around the lake. It's not just Tempe Beach Park. It could be other areas that you identified, which I think would be good for us to activate. The other part is some of the amenities, and I know I'm saying this because I know how this council feels. We can look at a dog park somewhere with all the people living down here. That's just one opportunity. I know we have a committee with that already formed to how we can look at really providing an amenity for all these people. I've often asked, just in and around the lake and area, there's over 40,000 people that live and work right now. You add the Novus District. I was talking to a reporter today about the Novus District. They're going to have an additional 20,000 people living and working in and around that area. But that includes 330 acres. So we got to make sure that we have the necessary amenities that desire for our residents. Doesn't mean we can't forget about the rest of the city because we're not going to do that, but that's just something as we move forward as a council, the partnerships, the public-private partnerships, the nonprofits, how we engage them, I think is really, really crucial. So, but thank you very, very much.
Oh, you're welcome. And just as a quick note, we actually have people coming to us wanting to participate. So there's a nonprofit that wants to do something similar to the solar swings.
Right.
They want to make it special to this park, and they want to raise the funds to do it.
And the fact that we can have that flexibility, I think, is good. And that we're continuing. This is a working document. This is like a guideline. This is what we aspire to be. So this is exciting.
I want to compliment you both on this presentation. I think you did a great job. It takes a lot of work to do these, and I know, Bonnie, you've been a long-term incredible employee, so thank you for your hard work, and thanks for helping. Yeah. And I just love the vision that you guys have created, and thanks so much.
Welcome, thanks.
Councilman Ardano Savage.
Yeah, really quick. Bonnie, I already think you're awesome, so I really do appreciate everything that you do. I mean, we're really lucky. I mean, we talk about the lake being an asset. You're a fantastic asset to this organization. That and Diane, thank you for everything that you've been doing. I think this is really great. I agree with Councilmember Keating. I think we're really right on the right track. There's one thing that I do want to kind of bring up, and I think an opportunity that we could seize upon, and I don't know how we incorporate it, but if you look at your one slide that you said, Bonnie, that we should keep, that one really great slide. But if you go to what you have created as the entry plaza area, and I want to go back and talk a little bit about an access point when we talked about where the Veterans Memorial, the abutment, the ash abutment is, and then the access road. Because right now we have a really group of dedicated people that are committed to making that happen, and we've now partnered, in cooperation with the city and trying to find out what we can do because that is a historic designated area, and I think we've got some really fantastic plans being able to move forward, but it's all really recent, and their willingness to go out and raise the funds. So for that to be able to expand as we talk about that entry plaza, because as we work and do that roundabout right there on that corner, you're gonna have a lot of people that are probably gonna come from that parking lot and walking right there. That would make perfect sense for that to be a solid access point into the Town Lake area, into Tempe Beach Park. So I feel like between the committee that's working together with the Veterans Memorial and extending it to that on that access road with the development right next door, It would be really sad not to incorporate that in this document, because I think that is a really key idea and some kind of low-hanging fruit of some things that are already in the works.
And also, we have the streetcars stopping mid-block, so if we're a little more expansive and welcoming with that front piece to bring more people in, make it easy for them to get in, I think it would be much more welcoming.
Right, yeah, and I think we're always looking for partners, right, and money, and obviously we know it's gonna take some resources, and they're already committed to doing it. And I know, that there are also some, like you said, nonprofits that really wanna see some inclusivity and some work maybe on the north side in regards to being able to people to come regardless of what their challenges may be, so they all have some access and some availability. To me, that's really, really important, that we make sure that we are very inclusive when we look at these different entertainment points or workout points. Yes.
So the amount of thought and creativity and public engagement has been really astounding, and I commend you. And I had emailed you, Bonnie, about that. And just wanted to mention, I know an amenity that Colby and I are especially excited about, but the zip line, I think that it would be such an attraction and something eye-catching, and could be in a way a traffic alleviation. You could have commuters actually commute in from the north side. No, there could be a parking lot that's off-site on the north side to alleviate parking concerns in Rio Salado. So, and then when you think about the water taxi, I think we have an opportunity to connect. I think we have an opportunity to connect back to our historical past. We think Hayden's Ferry was our original town
Sorry, Lauren,
name.
we're already on that zip line, and we're so sorry. We
I can
couldn't
just
get
see
over
somebody
it.
with a briefcase.
Or gondola.
And there were so many ideas that we can't even speak to them. I mean, it's so hard to present or wrap into one plan.
Well, Hayden's Ferry is an opportunity to connect to our historical past, and not, a water tax, not a ferry, obviously, not something that big, but it's something that could really
We've talked about
make a
water
direct
taxi.
connection. And you mentioned about the dog park. I think this is a perfect opportunity to do something that many animal advocates have implored, and that is for a water feature for dogs somewhere in Tempe. And what better place than to have something at Tempe Town Lake? So it'd be wonderful if we could incorporate a dog water feature. I know some people dogs would be jumping in right away. And we've spoken about this. I know that we're not concerned with east of McClintock, but, and we will be with Reimagine, but the Audubon Society and birders have just a treasure trove of birding right behind the Tempe Marketplace.
And they wrote me and actually want to volunteer to produce some signage about birding and educational opportunities and continue birding tours. So people are coming, wanting to be a part of this.
And the very last thing is that the timing. I know in the memo it said that we'd be looking at a CIP expenditures beginning in 2022, which kind of struck me with great alarm. And I realize that I know there's been criticism in the past that sometimes we have these design ideas that come up and then we have a 4-year gap and then things change and we have to go through the whole design process again. So we're not really talking about beginning any kind of action in 2022. We're talking about a phased approach that could begin sooner than that.
I hope so.
So that's up to us to
Up to us.
decide, I guess. Okay.
It's up to this.
So I would love to see those options on the table.
So
Oh,
Go ahead.
just to address some of those really quickly, there were some things on the slideshow again that were not really revealed that I think bear kind of a little bit more focus on, and that is that one diagram where you see the loop and the nodes. So as you bring up the Tempe Beach Park and the historic elements there, we considered Tempe Beach Park as kind of the epicenter of the whole thing for obvious reasons, but it's also listed as kind of a major activity node. And then the strategy was to develop a series of smaller nodes that can be done kind of in a smaller scale, but at least bring energy there. And then, of course, that loop that we spoke about. So if you're looking for how to implement this, we're trying to make it easy and still keep it pretty open. Before I move into the sunset, I just want to make a couple points because I don't know when I'll get to see you again, and this project is revealed a lot of very interesting things about your city. Again, the enthusiasm is just palpable, and there's kind of a lot of eyes on this and a lot of questions, like the questions you've asked that we were not able to answer. This is a pretty picture. It's a nice, happy diagram, but it represents the voices of many. And believe me, it's kind of a sweet spot Venn diagram of a lot of people asking for a lot of things. So study it, obviously, you know, until it's implemented, it's not, you know, it's not built, but it does represent quite a lot for being a diagram. And really, I think the goal here is to preserve what's special, because there is going to be a little bit of a gold rush for this area because it is so special. So part of the purpose of this is to sort of say, no, 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 we're not doing this here, we're going to do this here, and sort of give you a tool so that all this enthusiasm is at least sort of organized. And then there is really good timing now on a national level to come back to public spaces. And Tempe, I think, will continue to be on the map as a major destination, even with some of these kind of initiatives, because they do tie into responsible life in the desert, among other things. I mean, dog walking, at least to me, is extremely important, but also the fact that we're preserving our way of life here. And then finally, all of this stuff at a small scale and a large scale is possible. Bonnie has pages and pages of examples of how to do something for $3 or do something for $30 million.
Why, yeah.
No, you do. I mean, it's possible, and then you just have to look around the country and you can see that there's a shared spirit for this sort of thing. So.
Thank you. Councilman Granville.
So to just echo a few of the things, first off, just an outstanding document. Clearly a lot of work went into it. And I agree with what Councilmember Vice Mayor, Kuby said. I'm always concerned that a document like this comes to a full stop and then the new process starts. I think what you're hearing here is if you got a rolling start on the next process now, your next vote, I'm going to guess, is probably going to go well as far as adopting this document. So I would really like to see over the next 6 months or 8 months or a year, for example, when the Indian gaming grants come through, I don't know why every single one of these items that's under the threshold wouldn't be on our list year after year after year after year until we've gotten them all plugged away, because there is no reason to wait 2, 3, 4 years or to have a committee spend a year looking at it and which ones we put them in. And then the other one I would say is I'd be interested, going back to the zip line, I mean, it's a little bit of a joke, but there was a person very serious about doing it. No, I think it's a great idea. I think it would be helpful, though, for council, again, on part of that rolling start, to see a list of here are things that we might just do as an RFP and see who wants to do it as a private business and give council the ability to say yes and no, whether it's a purely private or private-public or purely public. But for example, I could see not just the zip line, when the person did want to do that as a business model, but the swimming pools, for example, I could see someone wanting to do that as a shared public-private partnership that might help us with some of the capital funding, or the volleyball courts that Councilmember Navarro's talked about, right? I could see somebody coming in and saying, look, if you'll give us X and Y, we'll help you early on so that we don't have to wait 5 or 8 years or whatever for this to come online. And so I'd love to see that list of Indian gaming grant thresholds, RFP thresholds, and then the sort of purely public long CIP planning process. And I don't really see why you'd wait on much of that. And the last thing I want to mention is to go to Councilmember Navarro's comment. He talked about the impact fees along the lake, of which there are none. However, everyone who builds anything in the city of Tempe pays an impact fee. One of those impact fees, I assume, is related to the impact they have on our park infrastructure. Given that this is a city-wide park rather than a localized park, I'm going to bet that every one of those impact fees related to park infrastructure could actually go towards funding things in this park. If that is true, I certainly would support that.
Councilman Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor, and I just appreciate this. This is very great. I'm just a couple bullet points and bullet points to the council. Obviously, what you guys have presented and what we're looking at is almost like a 2040 plan that could adjust, it could change, it could have momentum. But I think the investment is quality in what we do and how we do it. We can't be cheap around this. I mean, the lake is not cheap, nor should the entertainment around the lake be cheap.
So I think either.
Yeah, so I think exactly. So I think obviously we need to look at things like that. And to what you said, the support you guys saw and the interest, we know this is important as an investment. And I think as a council, when it comes to the opportunity to, as we pitch various things like zip lines, volleyball, we already have interest from AVP, colleges, high schools on doing tournament play there, but it has to be quality. So things like that, I mean, those are investments that we actually might get back on. So I think this is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for the council, and we need to make those decisions. And this is the true investment we need to invest in. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All righty. Next item, future agenda items. Seeing none. Okay, we're going to move right into the next items on the agenda, which is the call to the audience for the committee of the whole items, which is listed under section 4A and 4B. Audience members do have up to 3 minutes to address the city council. If you would like to speak on an item, please fill out your speaker's card located in the back of the council chambers and give it to the city clerk. I will call your name when it is your turn to speak, so if there's anyone in the council audience wishing to address us, I don't have any cards. Could you please get my attention? Seeing none, close that portion. Items 4A1 is to explore strategies to retain and grow business in Tempe. This is a committee of Councilmember Robin Arredondo Savage, Councilmember Keating, and myself, and Parrish.
I'll go,
Or
and I'll give it
Robin.
a shot. Thanks, Mayor, really quick. Parrish is here, so I really do appreciate it. But first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to my colleagues for entertaining this idea and really sitting down and kind of putting our nose to the grindstone. I don't know if you noticed, but if you kind of look backwards here a little bit, we've actually been meeting since January. So we have really put a lot of time, energy, and effort into doing a deep dive in the way that we deliver services, not only just internally the way they work, but basically how we impact customers and how important that is to make sure that we are providing excellent customer service. We're streamlining processes and providing the best service that we can. And we have some really incredible people. So I think whenever I have an opportunity, I feel like I always want to do it and just say thank you first and foremost to everybody that took their time to be on this committee. If you look at the list of people that came from the Economic Development Department, from Community Development, from Strategic Management, I just want to say thank you guys so very much. I know your plates are really full, and we all sat down to really try to improve our processes for the right reasons. So thank you guys so very much for that. And your work and the stakeholders that came to our public meeting, and from the DTA and from the chamber. It was just really, really great and a really positive meeting. So I thought what I'd try to do is kind of keep things at a high level and just remind people, because it has been a little bit of time. And then I'm going to turn over to Parrish to kind of give you a little bit more minute details just about where we are, because this is something that's really, really important and something that's been kind of floating around for a while of how we can always do things better. And I don't know if you guys remember, but part of the LDAT committee back in the day.
Yeah.
And if Shanna, my good friend Shanna, were here, she would kind of laugh that we're bringing this up. But we actually, when we worked on this committee, we not only just worked with the information that we have and that's current and some of the perceptions that were around, but we actually went kind of backwards and said there is a lot of information already floating around out there. Whether it was from the World Cafe thing that actually Parrish did not too long ago, the Childress Report, the Office of Strategic Management and Diversity did a collaboration with Community Development. We incorporated the Business and Community Survey. We talked about character areas. We took all those things and took out all the commonalities and just really took a deep dive into some of those things to talk about how we can do things a little bit better. And so as you can see within your notes here, there's a lot of really great information, but some of the best things was really just about how we can deliver things better and how we can be more efficient internally. So one of the biggest things that always came across that we always saw was super consistent was customer service. One of those, and I'll let Parrish talk a little bit more about that, streamlining development process. Everybody wants to try to eliminate red tape. And I don't mean just people on the outside, but people on the inside. So our employees too want to make sure that they're doing everything that they can to keep our customers happy. New technology. We've been talking about technology in a lot of different areas around the city, but because we spent so much time working with the departments, we realize how important it is to really make sure that we are making the right investments and have the right resources available for technology. If we want to be automated and if we want to be transparent as we possibly can be, those are things that we definitely need to make a big dent on. Updating codes and sign ordinances. We've been talking about signs since I think I was even before I was on the council. So signs, and there actually is some sign improvements, but we need to be a little bit more proactive to try to get people to buy into the new sign packages, and we haven't been able to do things like that. Let me see. So talking about business incentives, a little bit about making sure that they align, but I know we're going to have a little bit more deep dive in that tomorrow, so we won't have to go too far into that. And then the last one was just kind of council policy about creating some consistencies and some transparency. So I know this doesn't happen by itself, so it took a lot of work from a lot of different people, and I'm really thankful to Parrish because he probably doesn't get it enough. We just throw a lot of things at him, and he's really great about keeping us together, keeping us organized, and being able to bring some of these recommendations here today. So P, I don't know if you want to show him some of the cool things that we're really doing.
Well,
Yeah,
this
really
is
fast. Because I'll talk all day, you know
our
that.
communications office
Right.
put together these packets that will be a part of the project assistance team, Councilman. So you could pull out and they can actually have conversations across the table with prospective clients of the city. But I think what really, illustrates the importance of what we did here was, in my own personal experience, several months ago, a small business called and said, Parrish, you said that, Tempe loves business and wants to help businesses, yet we're having this difficulty because community development isn't stepping up and we're losing money. And I remembered about a year or so before that, meeting with this company, and they were saying, we're going to expand, we might have to move out of the city. And I said, no, and I alerted economic development, they helped them find a new space. And so I thought everything was good. So I was really surprised that they got this complaint call. So I contacted our community development office, and they looked and found out that it was actually the project manager that business had hired wasn't communicating all the realities of what was going on. And we were there ready to help, and we were actually wondering why they weren't being responsive. So with that, it really comes down to the idea of customer experience and this high-touch service that we really want to offer customers, clients of the city, whether they're businesses or even homeowners who want to come and do improvements to their house. So we're creating the project assistance team, which is going to be made up of a planner and a building inspector who holds it together. Right now it's Lisa Lloyd, and they're going to work and handhold from the time they come in to the time their project's done. And so there's all these little elements that you read in your memo about the, for example, the business development design. So it's going to shorten that cycle for small businesses who want to just do a tenant improvement. So these are things that are really important to these small businesses, and it goes back to that whole idea of retaining business in Tempe and also attracting new businesses in Tempe.
One of the things, it's important that when someone comes in, and announce and how things work. What we are trying to create as a group, as this committee, the subcommittee, is to have what Parrish just mentioned. It's not hand-holding, but it's also extra touch to let them know that we care, we want them here, and it's not just small businesses, as Parrish mentioned. And that cannot go understated, because more often than not, when I get a call, like as Parrish mentioned, I'm sure you guys do as well, when I said, well, there's got to be another side of the story. If someone's not communicating, and in this case it was a project manager, that happens a lot. There's always your side, my side, and their side. There's always three sides. I always joke around. But communication is at the end of that. And by us engaging at the front end of it, hopefully we won't have those challenges that we've had and provide that customer service even more so than we do now. So I think this is a great project. The only thing I would ask is if we have some check-in times. I know we're trying something new. If we could do a 6-month check-in or a year check-in with staff to see how things are going, what feedback we're getting, if that's okay with council, as we move forward with something of this nature.
I think that's a great idea.
6 months.
Well, that's
Like a
fine.
6 months and then a
Do
year.
a 6 months and then a year to see what we can tweak and see what feedback we get from our residents and companies.
And Mayor, I would say, I don't think we've ever done a working group that's really brought forward so many different recommendations, but, as we kind of dove in, it just kind of grew. And we had a really great group of people that really wanted to make solid changes. So I do appreciate that. One of the things that we talked about was streamlining the processes, and I know Chad and his team are working to kind of do that. And one of the things that had been brought up was about the way that we utilize, and are we most efficient with the DRC. So Chad is kind of working through that, working with the DRC to see if there's some more optimal ways to be able to move forward with that. And he wanted to share because I know he went and actually talked to the DRC. So here's some of the responses, which is kind of like 50-50. And I think from the committee's perspective, we said, you know what, we don't know if something can be improved unless we try to make a change. So we get it, you know, we know that Chad is trying to do things for the right reasons, and we certainly would support and welcome any type of change as long as there's check-in points to make sure that it is working the way it is intended to be worked. So I'm going to share these with those so you guys will know. And we definitely don't want to do anything to the DRC to upset them. We want to actually do it with them. And that's the whole point, is to really be able to really build a better, even relationship. And that was one of the reasons why one of the recommendations, and you guys have probably already read it, so I didn't want to go through every single one of them, but one that we brought up and we had talked about was having the consistency with a first reading and a second reading. I know as being on the council, one of the things that we found is sometimes people come in and they do a first reading. Sometimes it's a long first reading. Sometimes it's super short. Sometimes they don't do one at all. So this would really kind of create some consistencies and some transparencies and expectations. And what that template would look like was maybe just 3 or 4 short slides of certain aspects that we want in conjunction with the DRC. With community development, maybe even with other organizations and stakeholders, but just so we all are seeing the same thing and on a consistent basis.
So everybody good with this?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
I'm very excited about this, and it's going to make it a lot easier for small businesses to do business and get started faster in the city of Tempe. So this is great. Thank you, Parrish and Robin and everyone that participated on this.
Councilman Granville.
Yeah, I agree. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Councilmember. I mean, but I got to tell you, it was definitely work, but it was. But I think this is just like, to me, this is like just kind of scratching the surface. But we knew we couldn't do everything that we really wanted to do. So, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I think you're not going to find any council members who think we should have more red tape for a business to get started. So it's great. Anything you can do to improve this. 2 things. Number one is, as you look at that 6-month check-in, if you could just maybe give us a list of sort of forms that have gone from a strictly paper copy to either an online form or an online submission. I know 6 months ago, maybe, I tried to do like whatever that little the banner sign application is, you know, for like $200, you can put a sign out for 4 weeks or whatever, and was pretty surprised to find that I had to physically come in and physically be handed the piece of paper and physically fill it out. And I think now I can download the PDF, but I don't think I can submit it online yet unless that's changed.
That's part of the technology stuff that we talked
Right,
about that's in
exactly.
there, because there are
Not even,
programs
yeah.
that we're working with community development to have that accessibility, to be more efficient, to have the workflows that you're referring to.
Absolutely agree.
So that's part of it.
Okay, so the thing I say is, as you come back in 6 months, one of the success stories I think that this is right for is just talk about, like, look, in the last 6 months, we've converted these 5 forms over into a workflow system, and now they're online.
And if we can't, what the barriers are, because
Yeah.
we couldn't, right? Because
Right.
I think if it's specifically, we talk about technology and our challenges in technology, that if we could really specifically identify, like, hey, we need to do X, Y, Z, or this is not going to happen, and it's important, and we need to make it happen, so.
Yeah, and then
Absolutely, I
the
agree.
last thing is, I saw for the list of participants, I think it was, or is it stakeholders? You had the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Tempe Authority. Was there any discussion or reach out to people that maybe weren't a member of the chamber, weren't part of DTA, and just had gone in to do a use permit or a variance or a whatever?
Yes
just to
and
hear-
yes, because
Okay, great.
basically, some of the reports and the information that we took before, the assessments were exactly that. Were the people that have already been through the process, it was developers, it was zoning attorneys, it was, you know, property owners, so we had all that information too, and then plus we did a public process and we did an outreach to anybody that was really interested and may have had some concerns, and we actually had some people there that weren't very happy with us, and that's okay, but, you know, we worked through it, and, you know, maybe it wasn't really specifically for this, but, you know, we want to be accessible, so yeah, we had a
I'm
lot of
really-
input.
I'm really glad to hear that, just 'cause my concern when I read this was, well, like, I love the Chamber of Commerce, I love DTA, but they're not everybody, and so I'm glad you
No, we
incorporated everybody in a big tent.
Yeah, we did.
Question to that point is, sorry, is that okay?
Yeah.
So Local First, were they consulted? Because I know an example of WISP, they're not a member of the Chamber of Commerce, so they may not be.
Probably not
But-
specifically, but they were probably within the email of like, hey, we're having a public meeting, we'd love to have your input and whatever it may be. So we're always open to it. I think like the mayor said, this is definitely a working document. So if there's some information that we've missed or somebody that wants to give it, I mean, I don't think that the team would at all
But our
discredit
vendors
that.
heard, everybody's a vendor heard about it, or will hear about it.
Can't say everybody.
They will, most likely.
But yeah, and I think Chris Baxter actually is working on a really good rollout plan for some of the cool things that we want to do, and are really excited to be able to tell everybody about some of the great changes that are going to be happening. Because I think if you're a new business, what we found is maybe you've worked with an architect, or maybe you're working with somebody that's never worked with the city of Tempe. And so sometimes there's a lot of communications challenges, and having the availability to have that right software in place, to have the right technology will really eliminate a lot of those.
Well, nice work, you guys.
Yeah.
All right,
We're happy to be back.
we're ready to move forward.
Finally, yes. Parrish, did you have anything else?
I just wanted to add, Mayor and Council, that I think that I'm very enthusiastic about this working group and the recommendations that we're making, because under the leadership of Chad Weaver in community development, he's ready for moving forward and making things better. So I think we're going to be very confident.
And great shout out to Chad, his staff,
And
to
economic
everyone in
development.
community development, all the strategic management, all the people that were involved. And this is just a working document, flexible, and that's why we're coming to 6-month check-in as well as
Make it happen,
a
Chad.
year check-in. Thank you. All right, next item is new items for council consideration. B1, encourage internet competition. Mr. Granville.
Yeah, so this was something that came up a year or two ago. This is a slightly different form of it, probably a better form, candidly. As you may have seen, there are the signs on Rural Avenue about fiber optic wire and conduit being put down rural. There are lots of places that we're doing that as a city for our own needs, because we want to automate light changing and have a easier, better, smarter flow of traffic. We're putting in the conduit anyway for the fiber, but we're not filling the conduit with fiber. And so this working group would simply be looking to see if there's the opportunity to do RFPs, or if anyone's interested in using some of that open conduit space that we know we probably won't ever need, and using that as a way to jumpstart doing their own ISPs, at least along the routes where that fiber exists. The intention is this wouldn't be something that costs the city money. It wouldn't be the city getting into the internet business, but it would be the city helping other providers find out whatever sort of way they wanted to get into it, whether that's through 5G, small cell towers, fiber to the door, Wi-Fi, whatever technology, but they would be working in cooperation with us to use our backbones that we're candidly building anyway.
I appreciate this. The only challenge I see, and Mark, if you can come down just in case, the only thing I see is this is exactly what Google Fiber was trying to do, but the cost was so prohibitive because you could put it down the middle of the street, but the challenge is getting it from the street to the place of business or to the home, which is cost prohibitive. I don't even know if there's even space for a third party to come in to connect. If we did an RFP, that's why I would ask Mark to come down. This is similar to the conversation we had before, so I throw it out to the rest of the council.
Thank you. Mark Wittenberg, Deputy Internal Services Director, Information Technology. That's just a long title. So thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We actually, as part of this, we presented on the TISC, which is the Technology Innovation Steering Committee, and we just formed a subcommittee to talk about telecommunications and how we could encourage growth within the internet space, and specifically within 5G and wireless, because you're correct. Really the difficulty for internet providers is that last mile, or getting to the household. That's the expensive part. But to Councilmember Granville's point, when we are putting the fiber down rural road, we did think about the future. And so think about it, there's a 4-inch conduit, and within that conduit there's 3 individual, what we call interducts, or separate conduits. So we'll be populating one with fiber for intelligent traffic signaling. We're also going to pick up the library, several other sites. But there are 2 remaining that we could then use for development or for a telecommunications provider to utilize, and so they don't have to rip the road up. And so as we move forward with installing these conduits, that's our plan. We have done this in the past, like Limelight Networks down on Mill Avenue utilizes City of Tempe conduit already, and we also have some agreements with like Verizon. One of their main 4G LTE sites is actually in the 525 building on Mill Avenue and utilizes City of Tempe conduit. So we already do have this in place, but if you'd like, what we can do is come back in a future work study session and update you as far as what the telecommunications committee comes up with for encouraging growth and encouraging 5G in the city of Tempe.
That makes more sense.
Mayor?
Joel, then Robin.
Yeah, curiosity, I was back in DC and.
Joel, we can't hear you. You got to speak into the phone.
Okay, I'm trying right now again. Can you hear me now?
No.
Not yet?
Yeah.
There you go, a little better.
Can't hear you.
Okay.
No, we can't.
One of the things, and maybe they can just find some more detail
Speak
on
into
it.
the phone.
The federal government is trying to overstep in the mandate with the small cell sites and 5G carriers with basically, the federal government will implement small cell sites in our right-of-ways without our input or our ability to even regulate them. So I don't know if there's any more information on that, or if they can find more information on that, but that was something that was really being spearheaded at the Capitol.
Yeah, the TIS committee, I think, is already looking at that, and so is Marge.
That's correct. We are definitely looking at that and looking at the FCC laws that are coming down. I believe it's in February of next year, and that's why we're trying to get ahead of this. And really, the asset that we have would be our conduits, and that's really the carrot that we'd be able to work with the telecommunications companies and with the big providers to get in front of this and be able to pick the types of poles, the aesthetics, and encourage where they go.
But didn't you say that the future isn't fiber, it's wireless and 5G? So can you explain that?
There are a lot of wires and wireless. And so those cell sites, in order to get the high speeds of 5G, actually have to have fiber to the actual pole.
Councilman Arredondo.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's good discussion, something I always have, Mark. I feel like you kind of already got a handle on it, and knowing that the committee's in place, and I think with Councilmember Navarro, when we were in DC last week, that is a really big deal. Everybody's kind of really concerned about that, so I think if you can address that too. I'm totally fine if you would come back. I don't know if we need to do a working group. I don't think that's really necessary, because it seems like you were kind of already doing what they want to be doing anyway. But I would love to see, like you suggested, maybe come back in a certain amount of time and give us an update on a lot of different things and to incorporate those.
Well, I think the TIS committee is going to come back with an update.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Is that okay?
I'm good with that.
I'll just make my pitch. My preference would be to work on this and to work with this. I think I have an interest in it. I don't think we've ever had a precedent of simply saying like, well, staff's working on it, so therefore, don't have a subcommittee. I think they often work hand in hand, as was the case with the thing that just came forward, right? A lot of those things that came out of the business things are things that came from other committees and other programs. This is an area I just have an interest in.
I don't think anyone was saying you can't have an interest in it, but I think I don't want to duplicate staff's time.
Participate in it, is what
I
you're saying.
wouldn't want to. I didn't say that. I just don't want to waste staff's time because they're already looking at the very thing that you're talking about, and Mark just mentioned that.
And
Yes, Councilman, Vice Mayor.
I think that's one of the points. I think sometimes work groups, they can actually slow the work down. And if staff is already working on it, it will result in staff having to present and work and come together just to work with the council member. And we're all interested in this, we'd rather them present it to us in that way. So to me, it seems like staff is really taxed with all the working groups who created. And if they have a subgroup working on this, then that's an effective way to move forward and make it happen with greater speed.
Sure.
Fiber-like
Wait,
speed.
just before we don't have to keep going around in circles, is there consensus to have staff come back with TISC on this issue?
Yes.
Okay. All right, next is dog-friendly city. Councilman Granville.
Sure. There's, as we've talked
Thanks,
about.
Mark.
As we've talked about, probably in the last 3 or 4 years, it's come up quite a bit more, certainly since the Vice Mayor got on council. There is this desire to understand that a good portion, 60% of people have dogs in their homes. And often their best form of exercise is walking their dog, taking care of their dog. It's a companion. It's a quality of life issue. And I think it would be useful at this point to have a committee that looks at if there are statewide, national standards of things that we should be doing to make our city, the equivalent of a bike-friendly city, but for a dog-friendly city. And if that is, what recommendations we might have on things that we should be doing, whether that's dog bags throughout the city in certain areas, whether that's a certain number of dog parks per 1,000 residents, whatever the case may be, see how we measure up and see if there are areas where we can make improvements.
And I appreciate that. I do know, working with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, there's a organization that is part of a Better Cities for Pets that I referred to. We already have a working group for pets. What's the name of that? The welfare?
Yeah, animal welfare.
The animal welfare, and I think it consists of Councilmember Keating, Vice Mayor, and now Jennifer was added to it?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Vice Mayor?
We had a meeting yesterday, and there's no official designation for a pet-friendly city like we have with, dementia-friendly. I love the idea of that, but there's a lot of organizations that sort of give awards. So last year, our staff, VA staff, they applied for funding through Better Cities for Pets, and it's through, I think, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, right?
That's what I referred.
So we applied for funding. There were 50 applicants in Arizona, Mesa, and Tempe applied. We did not win, but we got high commendation for the quality of our proposal. And as a result of that, they are awarding, I don't know how much dog food, but Nutro dog food to One by One Animal Rescue, an animal rescue center also, and I can't read my writing, Arizona Beagle Rescue, I don't know why there's that, but 3 organizations in Tempe.
Because they're beagles, and they eat.
Why beagles?
They needed
anyway?
it. Maybe they needed it.
I've seen beagles.
Go ahead.
Sorry, so we intend to apply again, but they do have a criterion that our working group has been looking at, because we want to apply again it provides a good metric and a good measure, because they've asked us to apply again, and we want to look at the qualities that they give. It's, Better Cities for Pets. So we're looking at that. And we also, looking at park issues, barking dog issues. There's a whole range of issues. And Jennifer joined the group, and we're really glad to have her along with us for this ride, because she has such an intense interest in pets. So, I love this idea, but also we're sort of working on it anyway. And
Okay.
we have a 4th person, we could take a 4th person, but we're already sort of on these issues. And
Councilmember Adams?
to create a separate working group doesn't really make sense if there's already one.
Right, I'm very interested in activating the parks, and a good way to do that, Robin and I have talked about this before, is have dog areas in the parks, so people can take their animals or dogs to the parks and let them run free, let them get a little more exercise. It's also a great way to get to know your neighbors. Everybody hangs out there, and certain times of the day they meet at the dog parks. It's just really a good way to improve our communities, so in our neighborhoods. And so I think that we could probably incorporate it then with our group, Lauren. Go forward like that if you guys don't want to have a separate group.
Okay.
I'm flexible on
You
it.
guys are really taking it on. Thanks, Greg, for amending this.
Well, we
It
sort of
makes
already are,
sense.
because we were applying for this,
Yeah, it makes sense.
this award, which is called Dog Friendly.
More work for you.
All
More
right,
work for you both.
we're good?
Good job.
Better Cities for Pets.
Okay.
I don't have a dog park at my park, just saying.
Next item is over at Fair System. Councilman Granville.
Yep. As you can tell, I had a couple of free hours, so I put together things that have been on my back burner. This one's about, we've expanded the orbit system to South Tempe. Obviously, funds are always one of our limiting factors in expanding orbit and getting it to as many people as possible. One of the things that has been talked about off and on since I've been on council is, from an equity standpoint, if it's possible or appropriate or cost effective to charge some nominal fee or some fee to use the orbit buses, and what the benefits to that would be. I think at this point, we've never had a proper, there's never been a working group on it. There's never been a proper conversation about it. Candidly, I don't know what the results of that discussion would be, but I'd like to, and myself and Councilmember Adams, take that on and just delve into a little bit, see what the pros and cons are, and see if this is an area where we can look to improve our service and maybe use that opportunity to expand service as well.
I
Councilmember
don't
Erdonez
think
Savage?
that's true.
Okay.
We took this on, we did have this conversation in LDAT back in the day, and I thought I would go back and look at some of those documentations, and then maybe not like skirt around the Transportation Commission either.
Oh, no,
I
of
think
course not.
that
They'd be a
they
part of
need
it.
to, maybe it needs to come from them, if that's something that they want to do, but I don't know, I'm pretty sure we already had this conversation. It sounds very familiar, and I know we talked about the challenges of doing that, and then having to retrofit the buses and all those things, and there was definitely a lot of hurdles. And I think the fact is, I think it's really more about a policy, is, we have a neighborhood circulator for a reason, and we created it to be free. I mean, is that now gonna be something that we that policy is gonna change. So to me, it's more about a policy discussion than about, you know, how
I
much
would
do
agree
we
with
need to
that,
charge?
except for the Tobacco 21 conversations that we had that got a work group just a month or two ago. And I assume you had the same concerns about those, and yet the committee got created.
You're here
Can I
today
ask,
and I'm
what
talking
do you-
about fairs.
I mean, I'm sure it's coming from a good place, but, because we always try to improve what we have, but what are you trying to accomplish?
I'm just trying
Because,
to-
I mean,
yeah, I think-
you're charging something, I mean, in our at our last work study session, Transit came and explained everything that's happening for us, and I wouldn't want to put an undue burden on those that at least could afford getting in and around our city, and that's probably one of the reasons why we have the neighborhood circulator. That being said, I do know if he did put something in place that would have to charge, that probably costs additional money, and we don't necessarily recover those costs. So I don't know what are you trying to solve? What
I would say to go to the comment that you most often make, Mayor, we can always try and do something better, and we always are reinventing even the things that we previously reinvented. And so even if it was looked at, 5-6 years ago, that doesn't mean that there's not a reason to continue to look at it and to continue to try and find ways to improve our system and processes.
Vice Mayor?
Except, I mean, it does come at the cost of staff and considerable time and energy. Now, many of us participated, many in the audience, in a poverty simulator at AAT Still University last February?
Yeah,
And probably one of the overriding impressions many of us had was how critical transportation was for our most vulnerable citizens. Our 25% of citizens live in poverty, realizing that transportation, that the orbit gets people to critical services, to doctor's appointments, to jobs, and when that goes away, we start to have another barrier to transportation that increases the pressure on a family, on a student, on a, the list goes on, as someone who's homeless. So,
I understand.
You and I have also talked about this for years. I know you wanted to charge for the orbit, and you said, that everyone should be able to afford 50 cents. Well, that's a barrier to transportation. We say we're a multimodal transportation city, and to kind of handicap that, and for our most vulnerable citizens, and not just our most vulnerable, a lot of people use the orbit. It's across demographics, and that's why I think that we shouldn't pursue it, but I may not be the consensus.
I think you are.
With you, Vice Mayor.
I agree.
I feel like I shouldn't even present on 4B4. Like, at a certain point, you've struck out so many times, take the hint. But I will, because it's on the agenda.
Come on, no, that's really unfair, Colby, because we're answering these things and having a robust discussion.
And to be fair, it's not a matter of you, I think to be fair, some of these committees we're reduplicating committees that have been created and issues that can go to the certain committees.
Sure.
And that's, we have.
How many?
So with that
how
being
many
said,
subcommittee requests do you think have ever been turned down in the 6 years I've been on council?
I have no idea.
It's not agendized.
That's not agendized, one. And two, I think we're looking at what's on this agenda. And
All right, let's go to 4B4.
item 4.
All right.
Let's do it.
I don't even remember what 4B. Oh, I know what this one is. So this is one that Mayor, you and I talked about probably 3 years ago when we met one time, and that is this idea that somebody comes to a public outreach meeting, whether it's the public outreach meeting for the Rio Salado area, whether it's McClintock bike lanes, whatever the case may be, they put their name on a list, and we continue to recontact them for that thing. But then the list goes in the trash. And often when someone goes to a meeting, it's because they have a general interest in city activities, right? They go to the McClintock bike lane meeting because they're generally interested in transportation or whatever the case may be. And as of right now, we don't allow them a way to opt into a greater conversation. They could go to our website and they could do our listserv, but there isn't really a way for them to say, look, I'm showing up to this meeting, and if you asked, I'd be fine going to other kinds of meetings too if I knew about them. And so what I'm looking at, along with Councilmember Adams, is a way that we might utilize different methodologies or different technologies to start pulling in that information when residents want to, and reach out to them in ways that are likely of interest to them for future feedback.
I don't disagree with that, but if I recall, I'm going to hand it off to Vice Mayor Kuby, because at our last meeting, under new items requested, we were talking about an Esri system, which does the tracking.
A what system?
Esri.
What is that?
It's a GIS.
It's a GIS. It does exactly what you're talking about. And I know that it's coming back to the council at the next issue review session.
97, I just looked at this.
Okay.
And part of that, and it's coming back, I don't want to duplicate something that more than likely we're going to probably do an RFP. The staff is presenting to us. The Council Vice Mayor Kuby just asked at the last meeting. If you want to talk, we'll expand on that more.
Yeah, please.
Vice Mayor.
So I was very excited to hear a presentation, the end of a presentation at a meeting in Los Angeles last month. It's when I was calling into the meeting, and ESRI, which is it's pretty much the foremost GIS government. GIS is Geographic Information Services company in the country, and they presented on this system called the Hub. And one of the really intriguing things that I noticed was their council member communicator system. So, you know, we all have this issue. Somebody writes in about pet stores, commercial sale of pets. You have like 200 people that write. You want to communicate with them 3 years when the preemption law is overturned, and you don't have that capability. And this keeps track of all the complaints coming in, all the issue-based complaints or council agenda-based complaints or concerns or issues. And it gives a way for council members and staff to be able to communicate. That's not all it does. It's just one of the aspects. I learned talking to staff that actually Dr. Stephanie Dietrich, who came from ASU, who works in this area for the city, she's already looking at the Hub, looking at that feature, looking at features for how to continue to engage the public from public forums on every issue. You know, it's a really multifaceted system. It's probably an expensive system. We're going to hear about it from staff, and I'm really excited to hear about it. This is a really good idea, and I'm excited that staff is already on it.
So that would do what this was proposed.
I hope so. I mean, if we have the IRS,
I mean,
that does it, then
it's
we
coming
should
at the next
establish it.
IRS because we gave them some time to do it, and then we can get that information. Most likely, we're going to probably do an RFP for a general information system, a geographical information system like that, so that and that's normally what we would do anyways. Because if it's the direction of the council to move forward with this, I think it would be, but until we get staff present that at the next issue review session, which we asked at the last meeting.
Sure, that makes sense.
Okay. With that, we go to item C. It is any verbal updates or anything on the items in progress? If not, Mr. Ching, do you have any announcements?
Not tonight, thank you.
The only thing, I have two announcements. One is, don't forget, we have a voter registration day on Tuesday, September 26th. Make sure that it's going to be at ASU on Orange Mall to help celebrate National Registration Day. And I'll be out there talking about how important it is to get people registered and voters. So I hope all of you can help get that information out there. And then don't forget, we have the great Don Carlos Humanitarian Award. It's a 35th annual one that we're having. It's next week on Wednesday. We will be honoring Dr. Christine Wilkinson for her commitment to improving the access to education and opportunities to the most challenged populations. This really is a great event, and it's so great that Dr. Wilkinson is being honored. She was actually my counselor when I was a freshman at ASU to help get my classes.
My advisor in RHA.
So it's kind of exciting to see that she's getting honored. With that, we
Happy
are,
birthday to Lauren.
and happy birthday to Vice Mayor Lauren Kuby.
Better you than me.
We are adjourned.